with liberty will end.
Fair enough. Okay, Roger, your special subject tonight is the economies of the European community. Your time starts now. Best of luck.
Thank you.
How much does Greece owe, Roger?
$367 billion.
Correct. And who do they owe it to?
Mostly to the other European economies.
Correct. How much does Ireland owe?
$865 billion.
Correct. And who do they owe it to?
Other European economies, mostly.
Correct. How much do Spain and Italy owe?
$1 trillion each.
Correct. Who to?
Mainly France, Britain and Germany.
Correct. And how are Germany, France and Britain going, Roger?
Well, they're struggling a bit, aren't they?
Correct. Why?
Because they've lent all these vast amounts of money to other European economies that can't possibly pay them back.
Correct. So what are they going to do?
They're going to have to bail them out.
Correct. Where are they getting the money to do that, Roger?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one.
How much does Portugal owe?
Hang on a minute. What was the answer to that earlier question?
Just keep answering the questions, Roger. Where is Portugal going to get the money it owes to Germany if Germany can't get back the money that it lent to Italy?
Just a minute. What was the answer to the previous question? The question was, how can broke economies lend money to other broke economies who haven't got any money because they can't pay back the money the broke economy lent to the other broke economy and shouldn't have lent it to them in the first place because the broke economy can't pay it back?
You're wasting very valuable time, Roger. How much money does Spain owe to Italy?
$41 billion, but where are they going to get it?
Correct. What does Italy owe to Spain?
$27 billion, but they haven't got it. They're broke.
Correct. How can they pay each other if neither of them has any money?
They're going to get a bailout, aren't they?
Correct. And where's the money coming from for the bailout?
That's what I'm asking you.
Correct. Why are people selling the European currency and buying the US dollar?
Because the US economy is so much stronger than the European economy.
Correct. Why is that, Roger?
Because it's owned by China.
Correct. And very well done. And after that round, you've lost $1 million.
I've lost $1 million. I thought you said well done.
Yes, well done. You've only lost $1 million. That's an extraordinary performance, Roger.
I've only lost $1 million.
Very well done.
And that's quite good, is it?
Oh, it's excellent.
Sell everything immediately. Quickly.
We default. What happens to society? Is it hunting squirrels in the park, barter system?
Well, usually before countries default, they'll print money, then you have hyperinflation, and that destroys essentially the middle class and the working class and benefits, say, I mean, I don't want to pick on Goldman Sachs, but it benefits the financial wizards, the speculators, because they can move money in and out of the country very quickly and make huge speculative gains like the Fed recently did. And so then...
We've listened to the dullest, most technocratic speeches I've ever heard. You are all in denial. By any objective measure, the euro is a failure. And who is actually responsible? I mean, who's in charge out of you lot? Well, of course, the answer is none of you. We know who the villains are. You should all be held accountable for what you've done. You should all be fired. And your friends here got together like a pack of hyenas, rounded on Papandreou, had him removed and replaced by a puppet government. What an absolutely disgusting spectacle that was. I was wrong about you. I said you'd be the quiet assassin of nation-state democracy, but you're not anymore. You're rather noisy about it, aren't you? You, an unelected man, went to Italy and said this is not the time for elections, but the time for actions. What in God's name gives you the right to say that?
But what is really scary, and what has happened since I was last on Fox 3 weeks ago warning about all of this, is we saw in Greece the Prime Minister, Papandreou, dared to use the word referendum. He said, I'm going to put this package to the Greek people to see whether they want to stay part of the euro or not. With that, the bosses in Brussels rounded on him, had him removed and replaced by somebody who had not been elected as Prime Minister and was a puppet. And then it got even worse. In Italy, they were unhappy with Mr. Berlusconi. They demanded that he went, and we now have In Italy, the entire cabinet, the people running that country, not one of them is an elected politician.
Well,
They
who's
are
controlling, who's calling the
democracy.
shots? I mean, if it's this...
So we now have a German-dominated Europe. The very thing that we were told the European project would stop, the very thing that twice in the 20th century we fought and made huge sacrifices to stop, we now have a German-dominated Europe. And I don't think that's a good thing for Europe, and I think what is being done to democracy in the name of saving this Eurozone is something that should worry all of us.
But in Italy, we've got Mr. Monti, a former European Commissioner, one of the architects of the Eurozone disaster, unelected, not even a member of the Parliament at the time this idea came through, and then to compound it all, he's chosen a cabinet of people, not one of whom is a democratically elected politician. Whatever the source of all of this is, I think we have to say, if we believe in freedom and democracy, it is a monstrosity. Is this all a coincidence? There's an argument that Mr. Berlusconi wasn't a very good premier. That may or may not be true, but the essence of parliamentary democracy is however bad your government is, you, the people, get a chance, an opportunity in general elections to remove them and replace them with somebody else. The argument that he wasn't up to it, the argument that a technocratic government of experts will somehow be better, I think is wrong on two counts. Firstly, that Mr. Monti is one of the architects of this failure in the first place. And secondly, this is how dictatorship begins. A state of emergency is declared. Normal laws of democracy, normal judicial laws are suspended, and someone takes charge for the good of the country. This is how dictatorship begins. It is not justified, in my view, in any circumstances at all.
Portugal are goners, but those countries are less than $400 billion economies. Now we're seeing Spain and Italy attack. Italy is a $2 trillion economy with 2,000 tons of gold.
2,400 tons of gold, Italy. It's the second biggest position in the Eurozone. And that's the mother lode. I think that's been the target all along. The Greece, the Ireland, Portugal, those are sideshows. They're little microcap countries, not much of a deal there. But Italy's got actual gold that the IMF and the people who support the IMF, the terrorists, as I mentioned, like Eric Cantor, they're helping to facilitate the thieving of that 2,400 tons of gold, because that...
Recent wave of protests over the austerity measures in the UK and other EU countries has sparked criticism of the international financial institutions. The help provided by the World Bank and International Monetary Fund to debt-stricken countries is aimed at helping them recover, but is in fact dragging them deeper into trouble, as RT's Marina Portnoy now reports.
From smoke bombs to broken glass, austerity measures, budget cuts, and taxes have inflamed riots across Europe and elsewhere. Aside from anger, also connecting these cash-strapped countries, a heavy hand played by the International Monetary Fund and World Bank. Global institutions meant to promote economic growth and reduce poverty. Yet critics say their priorities lie elsewhere.
They're looking out for the interests of their creditors.
The IMF provides loans and influences policy changes of borrowing countries. But economist Mark Weisbrot says the neoliberal measures pushed often cause more damage than good.
Peripheral countries of Europe right now, where the IMF is very heavily involved, even when they're not loaning money, in Ireland, Spain, Portugal, Greece, Latvia, Estonia. The IMF is working with the European authorities, and a lot of these countries are not going to recover for as much as 10 years.
Public frustration with rampant unemployment, high food prices, and privatization deals is believed to have helped spark mass uprising in Egypt. At the suggestion of the IMF and World Bank, ousted President Hosni Mubarak sold public companies to local and foreign investors, while 40% of Egyptians earned $2 per day. Former IMF chief economist Simon Johnson says it's the U.S. that pulls the strings.
The World Bank and the IMF are located 3 blocks from the White House for a reason. This was the structure of political and economic power in 1944, 1946, and that's the primary structure of power in the world today.
5 of the largest emerging nations in the world today are demanding an end to Western monopoly over the global institutions.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa say it's time for leadership of the IMF and World Bank to reflect changes of the global economy, a transformation from club-based to all-inclusive. Marina Portnaya, RT, New York.
with those of other nations, eventually to form a world currency. We must willingly submit all international disputes to a world Supreme Court and abide by those decisions regardless of the outcome. And above all, we must turn over our most powerful weapons and even our armies to international control, so that the new world government will possess sufficient military might to compel the various political subdivisions by force, if necessary, to comply with the dictates of its laws and the decrees of its court. One man, one vote in a world democracy. It'll be a give and take situation in which we'll have to seek a common denominator, a middle ground between our way of life and the way things are done in other parts of the world. And it's rather obvious that we're just going to have to give up certain cherished traditions and customs and learn to adjust to a way of life substantially different from that which we inherited. But it won't be so bad. We'll get used to it, and future generations won't know the difference. Besides, we really don't have any choice in the matter. So let's get on with the job of putting an end to our own nationhood.